I've been taking my time, taking all of your time, taking all of your time.
Hey, my trendies, trendsetters, and my trendy tribe. Good morning for the second time to some of you. This will be pretty short. This will not take long at all. Hey, American born, Bonnie Mason, CC, Baby Peaches, 1960. Let me know if y'all can't hear me just to make sure before I get ahead of myself. Just double checking. Good morning, Demi Bell. Can y'all hear me? Hopefully you can. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, let's jump straight into it. I'll give you a brief summary, and then we're gonna watch the news report on it. Overall, tell you now, I don't like what this judge did. I don't like his reasoning. Let me get to it's a black female teenager that was on a field trip via a nonprofit called like the Greening of Detroit or something like that. You'll see it in the news. Her mom has signed her up for extra programs to keep her busy. She fell asleep in the courtroom on a field trip. She was not on trial. She was on a field trip. She fell asleep in the courtroom, and she was possibly irritable. Come to find out, even if I feel like you should research anyway before you start going off on a kid, because it's usually always something happening at home most times, especially when all they're doing is like it's a little lip. It's not even that serious. But she was nodding off, fell asleep twice in the courtroom. The judge ends up having her handcuffed, put into jail clothes, threatened her with jail time and juvenile detention. Then stood by his decision on the news, which you'll see, called it his version of scared straight. Then tried to reach out to the mom when he started getting the backlash. I think he reached out to the mom and was like, I can offer mentorship. The mom obviously is going to be like, hell no, I don't want you mentoring my child. Also, the nonprofit organization said he took things too far. He traumatized the child. At this point, he's been removed from the docket / bench. He has to go through sensitivity training. And they still said there will be a time frame, and you'll see the person talking about, I think it's the chief judge that's talking about it, who's also a black male, saying that even after that, they'll still have to evaluate some things before they put him back on the bench. And now he's also being sued. So there's that as well. So let's start going through it. If y'all want to, I have the lawsuit. We can kind of look at some of the lawsuit if you want to, because he's being sued by the young lady's mom. let's just start. So some of the news clippings, or I'm saying clippings, but they're videos. Some of it's repetitive, but each one has a little bit new nugget in it. So that's why I'm still gonna play it, even if they kind of sound a little similar, because some of them he'll have a different sound bite. Somebody will say something that didn't say something in the last video. So they're really short videos for each one, but if they sound just a tad repetitive, it's because they did have something different in each one. Yeah, she fell asleep on the field trip. Oh, and let me tell you this. She doesn't have a permanent home right now. So she's trying to get good grades. Her mom's trying to keep her busy. And she doesn't have a permanent place to stay. So she was sleepy and irritable. And it happens. And if y'all ever watch those like when people, like sometimes we did it with Judge Elenice Bryant, and I would love to do more, but time is not on my side. But if you ever watched one, he's always watched, so people will repost his court hearings. And there was one I did feel conflicted about. I wasn't sure, especially after I watched Natalie Lawyer Chick, where he was going off on specifically the Black female attorney because she was tired of the prosecution giving them evidence late, and then they had to try to make up time for it. And she just didn't have the respectability in her to play the game, basically, of what you normally play in the courtroom. And he was giving it to her, but her male partner, he did not chastise him. Although the male partner to me still was irritated as well, but it just comes off different from a man and a woman. So I was looking at him kind of like, because that's true. Why isn't he giving both the same energy? Then she had to come stand in front with her, like her advocate for the bar, or like I don't know what they're called. I'm so sorry, I don't know what they're called, but the lawyer, another lawyer was representing her, and she was really, really apologizing to the judge on behalf of the lawyer, because the other lawyer, I'm sure she was like, I'm not saying nothing, because what I'm not going to do is like actually apologize or something. But I just remember watching that, and that's how he stuck in my head. And because of that, I was hesitant to show y'all his courtroom stuff to just watch for entertainment, kind of like how we do Judge Elenice Bryant, because I was like, oh. So now here he is in the news. This was a few months ago with an attorney, but here he is. And so there was one other thing too that he said. Oh, he said he was trying to keep her from showing up in his courtroom to feature. They were there on a program. This wasn't a Scare Straight program. It was a field trip to the courtroom. Probably future law students type stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even that type of thing, but that's where he put her in the box. But I guarantee you, he would be way more gentle and find some other disciplinary ways to correct some other looking student if they fell asleep in the courtroom. I know it. I just know it. I think his default was this is the easy target. This is what my assumption is of this young lady, all that stuff, because I feel like reasonable stuff would have been you're kind of being a distraction. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the courtroom, or extreme, see if to move her off the program. I don't think she would have deserved that either. But what I'm saying is to put her in front of her classmates in a jail uniform, in handcuffs, and fuss at her was crazy. So, all right, now we're getting to the news stories. So be prepared to, most of y'all are going to be upset. Most of you. Let me change my sound.
But first, the action a judge took against a teenager on a field trip to his courtroom has some asking, is he out of order? Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carolyn Clifford.
And I'm Mike Duffy. The teen who fell asleep ended up in a jail uniform and handcuffs. Tonight, Judge Kenneth King is standing by the way he handled it, but a law professor takes issue with what happened.
7 News Detroit reporter Ruta Ulsanaida has the video showing how it all played out.
I spoke to Judge Kenneth King. He stands by what he did, placing a 16-year-old in handcuffs after she was allegedly misbehaving on a field trip in his courtroom.
One thing you'll learn about my courtroom is that I am not a toy. I'm not to be played with.
What started out as an informational field trip with the Greening of Detroit nonprofit Tuesday to the 36th District Court in front of Judge King.
This is the 36th District Court for the city of Detroit. We do just about everything that happens in the city of Detroit.
Quickly turned into Judge King getting visibly agitated over a sleeping student in his courtroom.
You fall asleep in my courtroom one more time, I'm putting you in the back, understood?
Judge King had her removed from the courtroom, but he told me that didn't fix her, quote, attitude. And that's when he pulled out the jail uniform and handcuffs.
That's not something that normally happens, but I felt compelled to do it because I didn't like the child's attitude.
King says he was trying to teach the teenager a lesson on behavior and respect in court.
I haven't been disrespected like that in a very long time.
He then threatened the girl with jail time.
I'm going to go to sleep tonight while you're sitting in the juvenile detention facilities.
Was I really going to do that? Probably not. Could I have? Probably so. But that's not what I want to do to a kid who's there on a field trip.
His methods on teaching the youth now raising questions within the legal community. Larry Dubin, a former attorney with a background in legal ethics and now a law professor, making his concerns heard.
Just totally inappropriate. There were so many other ways in which to have helped that young girl learn. I have never seen anything quite like what I saw that took place in the courtroom.
The nonprofit running the field trip tells me in a statement, quote, although the judge was trying to teach a lesson of respect, his methods were unacceptable. The young lady was traumatized by the judge's unnecessary disciplinary treatment and scolding. The judge standing by his methods, though, saying it was all just to help children from being in his courtroom later in life.
So that was my own version of scared straight.
And Judge King tells me that he has been in contact with the girl's parents and that he does hope to mentor her. In Detroit, I'm Ruta Olsenaitis, 7 News, Detroit.
All right. Thank you so much, Ruta.
Yeah. For what? Jail time, sleeping, what she say? Yeah, he said she showed an attitude. And root cause, she doesn't even have a permanent home, which we're going to hear from her mom. It's the mom is suing. If you're coming in later, the mom is suing. I'm sorry, do most of these black judges have to be so extra? They seem like they're always harder on us. That's what it seemed like. Yeah, it's bad. It is sickening. Hey, big sis, peaches and cream. Hey, everybody that has come in. I would sue the judge and the program. They were supposed to protect her. I could see the program possibly. I could possibly see that the program may be helping the mom sue. You know, I don't know. We can look at the lawsuit though. I have it up for y'all. So in addition to being homeless, he further humiliated her in front of her classmates. Right? She's humiliated in front of her classmates, and as her mom says, she's actually humiliated nationally because the story got picked up. So we're seeing that in that way as well. Right. No mentoring her. Heck no, you do not need to talk to my child. Good morning, sweet sis 41 fit. Right. Not happening. No. Bonnie said not having a permanent home is already wearing on a child. So you further add to it doing that. Right. He didn't ask any questions. Just, even if he did, he still didn't have to be that way. But he didn't even try to ask questions. He didn't dig at all. Just teenagers growing already makes them more sleepy than the average person. So then add on that stress from home and things like that. Okay, so now we're going to mom of teen that was placed in handcuffs by Detroit judge on field trip breaks her silence. So that's what we're about to watch now. And like I said, some of these are a tad bit repetitive, but they do have new things in them on each one.
Mother outraged by the way a judge punished her daughter on a field trip to his courtroom. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Carolyn Clifford. 7 News Detroit broke the story 24 hours ago. Well, tonight, the teen's mom says she did not know what happened until we started digging. Her 15-year-old daughter fell asleep, and the judge felt compelled to teach her a lesson. Well, now the story is making national headlines. The entire country is talking about how the girl ended up in handcuffs and a jail uniform. 7 News Detroit reporter Ruta Olsenaitis following up tonight as the teen's mom sounds off.
That mom says she was horrified to see her daughter in handcuffs and says Judge King didn't have the full story.
Would you want someone to treat your child like that? Would you even treat your child like that if he fell asleep in the courtroom?
Latoria Hill is a single mother of 2 children, including her oldest daughter, Eva Goodman. She signed her up for a summer program with the Greening of Detroit nonprofit to keep her busy. What was supposed to be an educational field trip to 36th District Court Tuesday turned into a traumatizing experience for both of them. Judge Kenneth King, not liking Eva's attitude and seeing her falling asleep, placing her in handcuffs and a jail uniform.
I'm thinking maybe she needs to go to the juvenile detention facility. You do understand that we have a jail for kids.
Latoria says Eva was falling asleep because the family does not have a permanent residence at the moment. They're just trying to make ends meet.
To belittle her in front of the whole world and her friends, to make her even feel more worse about our situation. I'm a single mother. I'm trying my best. I'm doing everything that I can.
You sleep at home in your bed, not in court.
So the fact that he was talking about you go home and get in your bed, how do you know my baby got a home? How do you know my baby got a bed, her own bed that she can sleep in? She don't have that right now. So she was tired.
We spoke to Judge King Tuesday, who stands by his actions to discipline the child after showing him, quote, attitude.
So do I have any reservations? Do I think I was heavy-handed in what I did? No, I don't, because I'll do whatever it needs to be done to reach these kids to make sure that they don't end up in front of me. So that was my own version of scared straight.
You didn't scare nobody straight. You made a parent upset. You scared my child. She was nervous, didn't even know how to act. She'd never been inside no courtroom.
Latoria, frustrated with how this was all handled, removed Eva from the summer program and stands up for her daughter now after she couldn't stand up for her in that courtroom.
And my baby been struggling and she been held on tight. She been going to school. She get good grades. She don't give me no problems.
Judge King has offered to mentor the girl. The family says they are not interested. In Detroit, I'm Rudolph Sinaida, 7 News.
Creating some buzz on social media. To give it a little context, Judge King saying that he was trying to send a message, a very strong message, to a 16-year-old girl and about a dozen kids that were with her on this field trip. His point in all of this was deter these kids from ever showing up in his courtroom for real, charged with the crime.
You fall asleep in my courtroom one more time, I'm putting you in the back, understood? You don't care? As soon as we bring the prisoner out, she can step back there.
A field trip to 36th District Court downtown Detroit this week turned into a scared straight simulation. A judge ordering a 16-year-old girl into jail clothes and handcuffs.
You're not fazed by this at all, are you?
Judge Kenneth King directing his questions to a 16-year-old girl who fell asleep twice in his courtroom, and when she woke, it was allegedly with an attitude, laughing and mocking.
So why are you being disrespectful to this court? Yes, ma'am. You sleep at home in your bed, not in court. And quite frankly, I don't like your attitude.
You can see at this point she's in jail clothes and handcuffs. The rest of the teens on the field trip behind her. They came with the nonprofit, the Greening of Detroit.
How old are you? You're old enough to know better. What is your problem?
Sources close to the situation tell us at this point, the back and forth turned into a simulation to send a message.
I'm thinking maybe she needs to go to the juvenile detention facility. You do understand that we have a jail for kids.
King reportedly said he never had intentions to send her anywhere, but went on to describe to the kids what it is like at the Detroit detention facility.
Not a very pleasant place to be in that. You guys enjoy your freedom, don't you? You don't have any freedom there.
Then he asked the teen.
That's where you want to go?
An actual attorney in the courtroom then steps in as if they were representing the teen.
She's nervous, nothing to do with what was with you. Didn't want to necessarily speak today. I'm just tired, that's all.
It ended shortly after that, with everyone in the group going home. The Greening of Detroit says this in part: although the judge was trying to teach a lesson of respect, his methods were unacceptable. The group of students should have been simply asked to leave the courtroom if he thought they were disrespectful, adding the teen is traumatized. We're told that Judge King reached out to this 16-year-old parent
Judge off the bench after sparking outrage across the country. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Carolyn Clifford.
And I'm Mike Duffy. 7 News Detroit broke that story that led to the removal of Judge Kenneth King. The teen he punished for falling asleep in his courtroom during a field trip ended up in handcuffs and jail clothes.
Well, tonight her mom is speaking out about the action taken against the judge and the impact of all this on her daughter. 7 News Detroit reporter Ruta Olsonida is staying on top of the story she uncovered Tuesday night.
I spoke to the chief judge here at 36th District Court. He told me that when he saw the video, he knew he had to act quickly. So now Judge King is temporarily removed from the docket, and that teenager's mom says it's the first step in their own sense of justice.
Don't play with an upset mother, because you told my daughter don't play with you in your courtroom, and so you can't play with the citizens of Detroit and an upset mother.
Latoria Till welcoming the news coming down Thursday from 36th District Court to temporarily remove Judge Kenneth King and have him go through cultural competency training. It's all after what happened to her daughter.
She just don't give a care. I'm tempted to give her some days in jail as a lesson.
On Tuesday, 15-year-old Eva Goodman was on a field trip with a Detroit nonprofit to the courtroom. She was irritable and she was falling asleep. So to teach her a lesson, Judge King placed her in handcuffs, a jail uniform, and threatened jail time. Latoria says the family currently does not have a permanent place to live. So Eva was off that day, the embarrassing ordeal scarring her.
She is having trouble sleeping at night. And so she keeps thinking about the effect, she keep going over and over and over.
Chief Judge William McConaughey says he spoke to Judge King and there was an internal investigation, but King still stands by his actions of trying to discipline the girl. So he has not apologized.
I cannot say what happened with Judge King and the young lady and her mother. There's been no apology to me.
Latoria says she hasn't heard an apology either, and this community believes she deserves to hear one.
The judge owes not only that child an apology, not excuses and not doubling down, but an apology not only to that child, but to the entire community. This can never happen again.
We spoke to Judge King Tuesday, but have not heard back since. Do you understand their frustrations about how that was handled?
I don't know. I would think that if that was my child and that happened to, I would be embarrassed by my child's actions.
Detroit police also do confirm that Judge King has been receiving death threats and they are investigating. In Detroit, I'm Ruta Olsonida.
This ninja said if that was his child, he would be embarrassed by his child's actions. He is lost. He's a lost cause. To answer the couple questions, Cece, the Greening of Detroit, I don't think it was a Scared Straight program. I think they were going to see a courtroom. He turned it into a Scared Straight program is what I think. Because the way that they talk about it, when we look at the other news stories, they removed him from teaching. This was not that type of program. That's not what they were doing. He made it like that. Because the nonprofit didn't expect this. Nobody that outside of him doing this really expected that's what he should have been doing. So no, that's not what that was. Lawsuit. I have the lawsuit. We're going to read the lawsuit, sweet sis. You might be in church by the time we read it, but I do have the lawsuit with me. The mom is suing. Make sure y'all are subscribed to Don Don's second channel, Chef Don Don 2. Okay, Artina, and some of it is being kind of like recapped, so you might kind of still be caught up if you stay in real time if you want to. Very arrogant, yes. Narcissistic, yes. Okay, or at least narcissistic traits, because I know I'm not good at picking them out, but I will say the traits seem to be there. I wouldn't accept his apology either, Bonnie, if he had one, because you see he doubled and tripled down even with his chief justice. So no, yeah, it's too late. It's too late. Okay, so here's the next news thing. So we're working our way along. So now he was removed from the bench temporarily. Y'all saw that. We're working our way to, they said they don't see him on even like the fall docket. They're gonna say that, and eventually to the mom suing him. Okay.
Judge has been temporarily removed from the bench after having a teenage girl handcuffed during a courtroom visit. 15-year-old Eva Goodman visited the court Tuesday as part of a nonprofit summer program. Well, Goodman started falling asleep, and the judge found that to be disrespectful and had Goodman placed in handcuffs and a jail uniform. Goodman's mother says her daughter was tired because the family does not have a permanent home.
You sleep at home in your bed, not in court.
So the fact that he was talking about you go home and get in your bed, how do you know my baby got a home? How do you know my baby got a bed, her own bed that she can sleep in? She don't have that right now. So she was tired.
Oh, heartbreaking for the mother. The judge will now go through training and address the underlying issues that contributed to this incident.
Watch. Laid down the law when a 15-year-old misbehaved in his courtroom, but some say he went too far.
It was a field trip that ended in handcuffs. A teenager visiting a Detroit courthouse with other students was soon clashing with the judge.
One thing you'll learn about my courtroom is that I am not a toy. I'm not to be played with.
Attitude. So then he brought out a jail uniform and handcuffs.
That's not something that normally happens, but I felt compelled to do it because I didn't like the child's attitude.
He even threatened her with jail time to teach her a lesson about behavior.
I'm going to go to sleep tonight while you're sitting in the juvenile detention facilities.
Was I really going to do that? Probably not. Could I have? Probably so. But that's not what I want to do to a kid who's there on a field trip.
Some claim the judge went too far.
Just totally inappropriate. There were so many other ways in which to have help that young girl learn.
The nonprofit that hosted the field trip saying, quote, "It's unfortunate that he chose to make an example of a 15-year-old girl in front of her peers. The young lady was traumatized." But the judge insists that discipline today can keep teens out of his courtroom tomorrow.
So that was my own version of scared straight.
Well, we're told the judge has been in touch with the girl's family and is now...
Well-known Detroit judge is temporarily off the bench after a controversial interaction with a teenager in the gallery of his courtroom. Judge Kenneth King had the teenager put in handcuffs after she fell asleep in his courtroom during a summer field trip. Glad you're with us at 11. I'm Devin Skillian.
Good evening. I'm Karen Drew in for Kimberly Gill tonight. Our Jacqueline Francis is talking with that teen's mother this evening as this story continues to get a really big reaction online. Jacqueline, what is she saying?
It sure does. Well, this all happened here inside of 36th District Court. That 15-year-old fell asleep while in the courtroom on a field trip. Judge King did not like that. He put her in handcuffs and a jail uniform. And now it's Judge King who's off the bench until further notice.
I can't hear you.
This was the scene in Judge Kenneth King's courtroom Tuesday.
What's your problem to this court?
15-year-old Eva Goodman came to court as a visitor on a field trip with a Detroit nonprofit. But soon she was in handcuffs and a jail uniform. Punishment from Judge King for dozing off.
You sleep at home in your bed, not in court. And quite frankly, I don't like your...
It's clear who was out of line.
I did see the video. I immediately was upset. I was mad. He took it out of proportion.
The chief judge seems to agree and said Judge King has been temporarily removed from his docket and will undergo necessary training to address the underlying issues that contributed to this incident.
I think it's great. That's what I think. I think he got what he deserved.
In previous comments, Judge King has said he was trying to teach her a lesson, but Eva's mom says that lesson went too far.
He didn't need to do all that. He could have sent her out the courtroom, made her sit out in the hall.
The video from that court hearing has been removed from the court's YouTube page. Judge King is not commenting tonight. Reporting live in downtown.
It's still hard to believe it happened.
When I first saw it, I was a little dismayed. That's not how business is normally conducted at 36th District Court.
The chief judge of 36th District Court, Judge William McConaughey, speaking out after one of the court's judges, Judge Kenneth King, ordered a teen visiting his courtroom into handcuffs and a gel jumpsuit, all because she went to sleep during her visit.
I understood the judge had good intentions, but how it was executed was not proper.
According to published reports, the teen's mother says her child was sleeping because she permitted housing.
But whether the young lady was homeless, whether she lives in a mansion, she should not have been treated that way at 36th District Court.
The incident has since went viral, and the judge has been disciplined.
Judge King is not doing a docket at 36th District Court right now. He will not have a docket until he has undergone some sensitivity training, as well as some other training dealing with trauma and dealing with cultural competency.
The timeline for when he will be back on duty is unclear.
After he has completed that training, and then we've had some conversations and we're clear on how we're going to move forward, then he'll be eligible to resume his docket.
But the fallout from this incident continues, and now the judge is receiving death threats.
I did have a conversation with Judge King, and he alerted me that there were some threats. Detroit Police Department was contacted through our director of security, and we are taking all threats to be credible. We were able to get Judge King out of the building yesterday, and he is safe. Threats are never acceptable.
Wayne State University also reacting. That's where Judge King has taught, at the university's law school and College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. The university releasing a statement which reads in part, "In light of the 36th District Court's temporary suspension of Judge Kenneth King, Wayne State University has reassigned 2 fall 2024 courses to other instructors. As a contracted part-time faculty member, Judge King has never had an ongoing faculty appointment. 36th District Court is often referred to as the People's Court, and the Chief Judge wants to keep it that way. That's why court officials regret the teen had this experience."
When I come back in town, would be to sit down with the family. And I would like to bring the young lady back to my court and to meet some other judges. And so we don't want that to be the lasting memory of the judicial system. We don't want that to be the last memory of 36th District Court.
As for the training Judge King is receiving, the court's other judges will receive it also, so an incident like this doesn't happen again.
We are going to schedule a mini retreat where we're going to have some people to come in and speak with our judges. We're looking to do that sometime in October.
In Southfield, Ingrid Kelly, Fox 2 News.
Okay, real fast. What was I going to say? I don't know if a comment reminded me. Oh, I misspoke. I said he was taken off of the fall schedule for the docket. It was not. It was for the, like they said, with the nonprofit, for him to be one of the teachers / instructors. That's what he was taken off for, but that they could see ahead of time in the fall. Yes, unfortunately, he's probably still being paid while he's suspended. No good intentions. I agree. Put him in jail clothes and handcuffs for a few days. I also agree with that. Let me see here. Okay. We say he was removed. Okay, the Wayne State University, actually, this is where they're reporting that they ended his teaching job for him, so he won't be teaching anymore with the Greening of Detroit nonprofit. Let's see here. Okay, and this is where the mom is talking about suing the judge, and then we have the lawsuit. We can just skim it. I won't read every detail. We can skim that one, but here's the mom.
For a Detroit judge temporarily removed from the bench after handcuffing a teen who was visiting his courtroom. ABC's Allison Cossack has a first look at the lawsuit that was filed by the teen's family.
It's been pretty devastating.
This morning, the family of a 15-year-old girl in Michigan has filed a lawsuit against the Detroit judge, accusing him of humiliation, false arrest, and unlawful detention after he targeted the teen during a courtroom field trip.
One thing you'll learn about my courtroom is that I am not a toy. I'm not to be played with.
Judge Kenneth King first berated Eva Goodman for falling asleep, then had her handcuffed, ordered her to change into a jail uniform, and threatened to put her in a juvenile detention center.
I'm going to go to sleep tonight while you're sitting in the juvenile detention facility.
Eva's mother says her daughter was likely tired because their family does not have a permanent home.
Eva doesn't want to come outside. She doesn't want to be involved with no one else but family relatives. It's hard for her to sleep at night.
So that was my own version of scared straight.
After defending his actions in an interview last week, King was removed from the bench until he completes training, and Wayne State University dropped him as a part-time faculty member. King's attorney declined to comment on the lawsuit, saying King only wants the best outcome for this young person and all young people. Allison Cossack, ABC News, New York.
Watch breaking news.
Boy, bye. Talking about he wants the best for all kids. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because you wouldn't have acted like that. Let me see here. Okay. Not that. Where is it at? All right, let's skim this lawsuit real fast. And then I will see some of y'all in this Love Marriage Huntsville watch along. Let me see here. And it's at 10:30 members. My trendy members, it's going to be at 10:30 this morning if you're coming to the watch along. The link has already been dropped for y'all in the community tab or Patreon, depending on where you're a member at. Okay, so this is a minor by parent and next friend Latoria Till versus Judge. Oh, okay, here we go. Versus Judge Kenneth King individually, Universal Protection Services, DBA Allied Universal Security Services, and or Allied Universal Security Services, LLC, John Doe Court Officer individually, and Jane Doe Court Officer individually. Okay, so let's go. Okay, it gets straight to it. So it says, Miss ELG fell asleep in class. She was the involuntary attendee of a guest lecture that her employer, vocational trainer, arranged to occur. The venue of the lecture was room 234 of the 36th District Court. Defendant Judge Kenneth King was the guest lecturer. Court was not in session. During the lecture, Defendant King felt personally disrespected when the teenager expressed her opinion of the lecture by nodding off during the presentation. And honestly, I don't even like how the attorney worded that. She didn't express her opinion of his lecture because she nodded off. She is in between homes and she's tired. I don't think it had anything to do with the lecture. I don't like that they put that there like that. Streaming the lecture live from the court's YouTube platform, defendant Judge King decided to enact his own version of the reality show Scared Straight by ridiculing Miss ELG in front of her peers and the defendant's online followers. He made Miss ELG an unwitting actor in his improv version of the Star Chamber. He berated the minor on a live platform, ordered her jailed, caused her to be handcuffed, demanded that she take off her clothes and change into jail garb, imprisoned her for hours, and then conducted a fake trial with her classmates and possibly his internet followers as her jurors and his audience. Wow. Defendant King's extrajudicial actions violated the minor's constitutional rights, subjecting him and the other defendants to liability. As stated in the balance of this complaint, any defense of immunity will fail. I think they meant to say her. Let's go on down from jurisdiction. Let's go on down from part. I want to see. Okay, the defendants, John Doe Court Officer and Jane, I'm going to say Roe, they say Roe, Jane Roe Court Officer were at all material times and upon information and belief residents of Wayne County, Michigan, who were acting within the course and scope of their employment by the universal defendants within Wayne County. Okay, keep going. Factual allegations. The events giving rise to this lawsuit occurred on August 13th, 2024. 15-year-old Miss ELG was participating in a vocational program run by a local nonprofit organization. The nonprofit employed teenagers to plant foliage throughout the city of Detroit and organize programs to teach youths how to succeed in the workforce. The nonprofit had organized a field trip to the 36th District Court for August 13th, where students who wanted to be attorneys could learn about a career as a lawyer. The venue selected was the 36th District Court. The lecturer was defendant Judge King. Miss ELG did not learn about the scheduled trip until she arrived at her worksite prepared to plant trees. She was not interested in the practice of law and instead aspired to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. Permission for Miss ELG's participation in the trip was not sought from her mother. Otherwise, she would have stayed home or attempted in advance to arrange to work with a crew that was not scheduled to travel to court. Miss ELG arrived for work and was bused to the court building. When she arrived, she was seated in the gallery of the courtroom assigned to defendant Judge King. Court was briefly called, and the young people were required to observe a homicide proceeding that was presided over by defendant Judge King. The court went into recess after the proceeding, and defendant Judge King's role changed from judge to teacher. Defendant Judge King left the bench and asked the young people whether any of them wanted to be a judge. One young man raised his hand, and defendant Judge King disrobed and donned the child with his judicial apparel and seated him at the bench before proceeding with a monologue regarding his practice of law. Although the court was no longer in session, defendant Judge King broadcast his lecture publicly using the court's YouTube platform, permitting his followers and fan base to both observe and comment. An otherwise shy, polite, and courteous Miss ELG, who was not interested in the practice of law and who had had a rough night's sleep, unintentionally expressed her disinterest in the proceedings by nodding off after being exposed to a court hearing that forced her to relive a traumatic event, causing her to shut down. Though neither she nor her mother consented to her attendance at a hearing involving violence or the use of her image and identity on a public platform during an educational seminar, defendant Judge King publicly berated and humiliated Miss ELG for nodding off, falsely casting her as a juvenile delinquent because, as he later said, he was disrespected. Ms. ELG quietly apologized and defendant Judge King temporarily moved on. However, despite her efforts to be attentive, the child could not stop her mind from seeking a safe space and nodding back off. Defendant Judge King confronted Ms. ELG again for sleeping in class, instructing her that perhaps she needed to go to the restroom and get a drink of water. Defendant Judge King told Ms. ELG to go relieve herself because of what he had in store for her. It is apparent that he developed a plan for the amusement of his followers and fan base to cast Miss ELG unwittingly in what he later described as his own episode of Scared Straight. Miss ELG was greeted by defendant John Doe court officer as she returned to the gallery to sit beside her classmates before defendant Judge King convened court. And I'm going to say, I think they should have said lecture because it wasn't court at that time. Defendant John Doe, court officer, first derided Miss ELG and accused her of disrespecting the judge. Then defendant John Doe, court officer, directed Miss ELG to the side of the bench and restricted her movement by ordering her to stand still as a real defendant was escorted out of a detention cell. Defendant John Doe, court officer, next directed Miss ELG into the detention cell and locked her inside while defendant Judge King brought court into session and called his first case. Approximately 10 minutes later, defendant Jane Rowe, court officer, opened the detention cell, handcuffed Miss ELG, and directed her to another cell where she was told to strip her clothing and put on a jail jumpsuit. Miss ELG removed her hoodie, but told defendant Jane Rowe, court officer, that she would not take off the rest of her clothing. Evidencing that defendant Jane Rowe and defendant John Doe court officers knew that Miss ELG was an unwilling participant in a farce, she was permitted to put the jumpsuit over her clothing before being handcuffed and transported back to the original holding cell where she was held captive for hours before being recuffed and brought into the courtroom after the close of the day's proceedings where a fake trial was convened. Further evidence of the phoniness of defendant Judge King's reality show is the absence of a case number for Miss ELG. Additionally, despite the entire episode being broadcast on YouTube, upon information and belief, there is no court record of the sham proceedings. The sham proceedings continued. No generic name. You're not blocked. I see you. The sham proceedings continued. Defendant Judge King caused a random private attorney to pose as a counsel for Miss ELG. On live internet television, defendant Judge King coerced a minor to disclose her name and other personal information, such as her age and the name of her high school, to his followers of the show. Oh, whoa. Defendant Judge King then threatened to send Miss ELG to juvie with vulgar stories of beatings and feces at the county's juvenile detention center, falsely casting her as a dishonest, disrespectful delinquent and simultaneously publicly disparaging the conditions of a county-operated facility where judges with appropriate jurisdiction and proper findings of fact, having been determined with due process of law, are required to send juvenile offenders. Then making a mockery of the justice guaranteed by the due process clauses of the United States Constitution while panning the camera to focus upon his juvenile audience for the benefit of his internet fans, defendant Judge King asked Ms. ELG's peers to serve as a fake jury of public opinion and decide whether to let her go home to her mother and grandmother or to serve time in the juvenile jail that he had but moments before denigrated as unfit. All he did was show how to go from judge to bully. I agree. Of course, defendant Judge King was not going to send Miss ELG to jail as there was no actual case or controversy, and because he admitted to the press that the foregoing was simply his version of scared straight because he was going to teach this teen a lesson for disrespecting him. Rather than using the press as an opportunity to extend an apology for what many have labeled as extreme and outrageous conduct on the judge's part, defendant Judge King doubled down by telling reporters that Miss ELG had a bad attitude, was disrespectful, and required his mentorship, while simultaneously offering a watered-down acknowledgement that he lacked jurisdiction to hold Miss ELG in contempt, knowing that the conduct that disturbed him occurred during a lecture where he served not as a judge, but as a teacher in a venue that he had transformed from courtroom to classroom, telling the public that he probably did not have the authority to jail her. Common sense and the facts demonstrate that a grown man became rattled by a young girl that he falsely concluded to be and cast as a delinquent, who was actually a fragile teenager forced to attentively face a past trauma during an actual prior court proceeding that had ended before shutting down during class. As a result of his anger, the defendant immaturely decided to teach the girl a lesson in front of her peers and his internet audience. Plaintiff hereby realleges and incorporates, and had there been an actual case or controversy, Ms. ELG would have been required to be provided with due process of law. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees that a person will not be subjected to unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution guarantee that no person will be compelled to be a witness against herself, nor be deprived of her liberty without due process of law. The Sixth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees, among other things, that a person will not be subject to prosecution without representation of her choosing. The Eighth Amendment guarantees that unusual punishments will not be inflicted upon citizens. The Constitution of the State of Michigan affords similar protections. Defendant Judge King violated all the foregoing guarantees in his handling of Ms. ELG. She was subjected to unusual punishment that was cruel before farcical process because she upset defendant Judge King in his unofficial and personal capacity. Though defendant Judge King acted under color of law, his actions were outside the bounds of his authority, providing no just process at all. The required process, had there been an actual case or controversy, is clearly established. Ms. ELG was not accused of a crime. However, had an arrest been made, defendant Judge King and the 36th District Court would have lacked jurisdiction over her because it is the probate court that has jurisdiction over all cases involving juvenile delinquency unless and until other legal process occurred. Therefore, the only way that Ms. ELG could have been arrested and imprisoned is if she was legitimately found to be in criminal contempt of court. Arresting and jailing a person such as Ms. ELG before a contempt hearing, as occurred in this instance, is illegal. A judge must go through a process to hold a person in contempt of court. To avoid any misunderstanding of the contempt process, the Michigan Supreme Court provides a bench book that is accessible to all judges and is complete with a flowchart to simplify the steps required to hold a person in contempt of court. I love this because it's sarcastic, but it's true. And you got to speak down to him because he was bullying. He was using the law like his personal bully tactics. Accordingly, no judge can credibly claim that they did not understand the rules. To work outside the law is not a mistake, it is an abusive process. The first step in determining whether a person has committed a contemptuous act is to consider whether the court was in session, because Michigan law permits a court to punish disorderly, contemptuous, or insolent behavior during a court sitting in its immediate view and presence, and directly tending to interrupt its proceedings or impair the respect due its authority, and any breach of the peace, noise, or disturbance directly tending to interrupt its proceedings. The alleged contemptuous conduct, nodding off, occurred during a lecture to students on a field trip. Defendant Judge King was acting as a teacher, not judge, when Ms. EOG nodded off, and court was not in session because there was no proceeding pending. Furthermore, Ms. EOG was an adolescent student who did not engage the judge in his official capacity. Because the court was not in session and the defendant was not acting in his capacity as judge, defendant Judge King lacked all jurisdiction to use the contempt power. Even when proper to exercise, the courts are cautioned to use the contempt power with the utmost restraint and only when the contempt is clearly and unequivocally shown. Courts have held that making unjustified threats to use the contempt power is judicial misconduct. Thus, if the court was in session and defendant Judge King had the jurisdiction to hold Ms. EOG in contempt, which he did not, he would have been required to seriously consider whether a spectator with no connection to any matter pending before the court nodding off impeded the functioning of the court. A reasonable jurist would have recognized that it is not uncommon for people in the gallery and even jurors to occasionally nod off, in which case an admonition might be appropriate. Upon information and belief, defendant Judge King is in fact aware of the foregoing possibility because every time that his court returns to session, the defendant's court officer reminds people in the gallery that they should not eat, drink, talk, or sleep while court is in session, demonstrating his knowledge that nodding off during a break is not contempt. Upon further information and belief, defendant Judge King has told members of the press that even lawyers occasionally fall asleep in his courtroom, and his real problem was not with Ms. EOG nodding off, but her attitude as exhibited by her body language. Nevertheless, had a spectator nodded off during a proceeding before defendant Judge King and he was so offended that he determined that the conduct was contemptuous, then he would have been required to decide if he had witnessed civil contempt or criminal contempt, understanding that civil contempt involves restoring the status quo, while criminal contempt involves punishment for a prior act. Accordingly, if the contempt was civil in nature, defendant Judge King would have lacked all authority to arrest and jail the contemptuous spectator as soon as the spectator awakened, because the status quo would be restored. If the contemptuous conduct was criminal in nature and the judge intended to punish the spectator with incarceration for sleeping, a hearing with legal representation of the accused choosing would have been required to occur before the accused was arrested and jailed. Furthermore, and particularly if the judge felt disrespected but chose to defer hearing the matter until the end of his case call instead of immediately and summarily conducting a contempt hearing, defendant Judge King would have been required to turn the matter over to a separate judge to consider the charges. If the spectator was a minor and the hearing deferred, the matter would have likely been turned over to the juvenile court, but certainly to another judge because defendant Judge King would have lost jurisdiction. None of the required process was followed in this matter because defendant Judge King did not transform from teacher to judge. The process that defendant Judge King orchestrated for Ms. EOG was applied first in his capacity as a teacher, before he expanded it to include producer when he broadcast the fake trial to entertain his internet audience. Defendant Judge King, acting under color of law by representing that he had the authority as a state district judge to punish Ms. EOG when he did not, publicly punished and demeaned her by broadcasting his own rendition of Scared Straight. The difference between defendant Judge King's version and the reality series is that the participants of the series consented to participate in the real Scared Straight. It is expected that defendant Judge King will claim that he is judicially immune from liability in this lawsuit. Rather than being truly absolute, the doctrine is self-limiting. Judges are only immune from liability for acts done within the scope of their judicial authority and over which they had jurisdiction. It is clearly established that judges are subject to liability when they act outside of their judicial capacity. For example, when they perform the administrative duties of hiring and firing. In that regard, it has been held that a judge is liable for the discriminatory termination of a court officer. Gonna keep going. Judges perform many non-judicial acts. Judges may serve as adjunct legal professors teaching law students, or they may serve as keynote speakers at public events. Upon information and belief, defendant Judge King has in fact served as an adjunct law professor. Certainly, the defendant would not claim that he possessed the authority to hold a law student in contempt of court for sleeping in class because, in addition to serving as a professor, he carried the title of judge. Nor would a judge believe that a heckler at a speaking event could be jailed by him for interrupting him. Precedent dictates that the location of the venue does not alter the function of the speaker. In other words, teaching the class in the courtroom does not transform the function of the person from teaching to adjudicating. Rather, it has been held when it is beyond reasonable dispute that a judge has acted out of personal motivation and has used his judicial office as an offensive weapon to vindicate personal objectives, and it further appears that no party has invoked the judicial machinery for any purpose at all, then the judge's actions do not amount to judicial acts, even if the acts occurred in the courthouse and a record of the bogus contempt proceeding was made by a stenographer. In this matter, Ms. EOG was on a field trip to the court. The 15-year-old was not in the courtroom for legal process. Defendant Judge King was acting as a lecturer and the court was not in session when Ms. EOG is alleged to have fallen asleep. Moreover, it appears that the judge simply disliked her after judging her body language and assuming he knew her attitude. The perceived attitude offended defendant Judge King, and his personal objective was to punish her by scaring Ms. EOG straight. Defendant Judge King's decision to make an example of Ms. EOG by conducting a fake trial with real incarceration before an internet audience did not transform his role from teaching to adjudicating. Therefore, he is not protected by judicial immunity. I'm skipping some that some that might be repetitive. I'm skipping because I did say I would skim. Okay, defendants John Doe and Jane Roe, correction officers, are likewise not entitled to quasi-judicial immunity or qualified immunity, as they were private security guards who were not performing adjudicative functions in this matter, and because judicial immunity is inapplicable. Furthermore, defendants John Doe and Jane Roe were willful participants in defendant Judge King's show trial who were not acting pursuant to a valid court order when they arrested, handcuffed, and incarcerated Ms. EOG before the fake process. They're not entitled to governmental immunity because they are not officers or employees of a governmental agency, and they acted with actual malice by performing the ministerial acts of arresting, handcuffing, and incarcerating Ms. EOG. Okay, so I'll just read the title for count one. Count one, defendant Judge Kenneth King, malicious prosecution in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Keep going. Keep going, because I know there's another one. Count two, defendant Judge Kenneth King, unlawful arrest and incarceration in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Sorry, I'm scrolling. Count three, defendant Judge Kenneth King, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Count four, defendant Judge Kenneth King, invasion of privacy. Keep going. Count five, defendant Judge Kenneth King, false arrest and imprisonment. Count six, defendants John Doe and Jane Roe, court officers, Fourth Amendment, unlawful seizure and detention. Oh, I didn't read all the dollar amounts they were asking for, but just this one right here, the Jane Doe and Jane Roe court officers, they're asking for an amount that exceeds 70. Yeah, yep. The court entered judgment in her favor against defendants John Doe and Jane Roe court officers in an amount that exceeds $75,000, exclusive of costs, interest, expert fees, and attorney fees. Count seven, defendants John Doe and Jane Roe court officers, false arrest and imprisonment. another 75, or that exceeds 75,000. Count 8, defendant universal vicarious liability for state law torts. Another exceeds 75,000. And I'll go back up to see if they're like, what's one of the ones where the judge, what did they say for the judge? Let me see. Who is this? Okay, we'll look at the bottom of this one just to see. Okay, so each count might have an amount that they're asking for that exceeds $75,000, because that's what 4 of the counts we looked at so far have. So at the bottom, let's go down. I'm looking for the prayer. I think I just passed it, but I just want to make sure. Okay, so they're just all separate. So each one exceeding $75,000, each count. So, and they demand jury, trial by jury, which I agree. Get the jury. That's crazy. Even with without us having those details at first, I was done. Knowing the extra is crazy. Okay, y'all. So that is the end of this one. Goodness gracious. I hope they get their monetary ask. If not all of it, a significant amount of it. He definitely has most likely done this more than once. I agree with looking into his record and maybe some complaints against him. That attorney might have filed a complaint against him. The one I was talking about, the black female attorney, where I was like, and I can tell you honestly, fresh off when I first watched it, I was like, oh, that seems a little strong to address the court that way. But then when I rewatched it with Natalie Lawyer Chick on her channel, I was like, first of all, he's not even handling both of them the same way. And I'm like, this is a lot. And then he's sitting there all haughty while the other black woman attorney that was representing the other attorney, probably for something to do with her bar and everything, her bar license and stuff, was, oh my gosh, she was having to be so apologetic. And just rewatching it, it didn't sit well with me. And yeah, this confirms it for sure. But okay, y'all, Don Don is going to be live, I think at 9:30 Central Standard Time, possibly. So Chef Don Don too. So you can check out his channel. And members, I will see y'all in a little bit for our Love and Marriage Huntsville watch along for last night's episode. All right, y'all. Well, I appreciate your time, and I will talk to y'all later. I agree, Lexi. All right, bye.
I've been taking my time, taking all of your time, taking all of your